Thank you, friends. Special greetings to you all. Thank you all for listening to my reading of the book of Esther. And I won't say the whole Megillah anymore because we get that joke already. No. I know at least the 4 people who wrote to me listened, so thank you. Friends, the story of Esther and Mordecai and what transpired is the story of a miracle. And of course, it signals the countdown to another great miracle, the miracle of freedom, coming up in a few weeks. And speaking of Mordecai, let us all send prayers of healing for Martin Mordecai Wiseman, who's found himself in ICU in the hospital, but he's not alone, because our prayers and hopes and his daughter Julie's wishes are with him. Mishaberach Avotenu, Makor HaBracha Limotenu. May the source of strength who blessed the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. Mishaberach Imotenu, Makor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah, shlima. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit. Now, one of the central Jewish prayers for those who are ill or recovering from illness or accidents is this prayer. And it's simply called the Mishaberach. The prayer takes its name from the first 2 words, mi, and shaberach, meaning the one who blessed. And what it does is, it asks that the one who blessed our ancestors bring about a complete healing for the person for whom the blessing is said. The prayer is for the physical cure as well as spiritual healing, asking for blessing, compassion, restoration, and strength within the community of those facing illness. So when we recite it, think of the names of anyone who may be in need of healing, physical, emotional, spiritual. And refuah shlima means complete recovery. We're wishing a complete recovery on everyone. So let us hope he and any you know who need healing, heal. It was great seeing my old friend Daniel the other night. Time has stood still. We had once performed The 3 Witches of Macbeth on stage, and it had probably been 25 years since I last saw him. And he reminded me of that immortal Frank Zappa imitation Sgt. Pepper album, We're Only In It For The Money. Classic 1967 recording and quite a statement. But sometimes it's not just about money, my friend. Sometimes it's about power and prestige. Statement that can still be said of many today, with its poignant lyrics like, "Hey punk, where you going with that flower in your hand?" Well, I'm going up to Frisco to join a psychedelic band. Frank Zappa, one of a kind, and whose son Dweezil was one of the stars of that great animated series Duckman. And I'm sure Kenny's little creatures are still on display. And it was great speaking to my cousin Brett. We do not talk enough. And so when we do, it is always a thrill for me. She's so smart. And I never leave a conversation not having learned something. Now, in our ongoing journey through the patterns of life, friends, we are given more than enough energy to transform ourselves every day. But we waste 98% of it on tensions, on emotional reactions unrelated to what is actually occurring, and on daydreaming and mental chatter. So instead, express one of your positive qualities today. Express your leadership and strength with those who need it. And I'd like to remind you all that we're 1 week from the first of Nisan, the first of the year, when your spiritual year begins, and you can imprint your will on the universe. Now, if anyone would like, please send me an email, and I'll send you one of these great little booklets that we have that takes you through the first 12 days, like I talked about last time, and what to focus on for each of the days. And there's room for you to make notes on what happens that day. And friends, I've gone back over the years to see what I wrote, and it is often quite incredible. So if you're interested, drop me a line. Now, last week's Parsha ended with Aaron and his sons. You remember that? Sitting for 7 days at the tabernacle's entrance, preparing for the climax that's coming, building anticipation for the inauguration of the priesthood. So if we follow the weekly cycle of Torah readings, we emulate what's happening in the text because we too have now waited for 7 days, as if we were at the entrance to the tabernacle. And to be sure that we get the connection, this Parsha is titled Shemini, 8th. And if we pay proper attention to this, we come to the story of the inauguration with anticipation. So we appreciate the story, and we appreciate the power of what goes wrong in this story, the catastrophe of Nadab and Abihu. Now, Leviticus has only 2 narrative accounts. The first is the story of the consecration of Aaron and his sons to the priesthood of Israel, which we've been reading and which will conclude this week. It's a lengthy and detailed account. That's another way of saying boring. And most of the ceremonies that it describes have already been presented in Exodus 29 as commands that the Lord gives to Moses. And now the fulfillment of these commands is narrated against the backdrop of a story. Now, it's an exciting ceremony of ordination. Mine was a little less violent, but just as powerful. Unfortunately, not only is this a book that loses people because of its dry list of laws, but also because of the stark, even cruel aspects of God that goes against the inherent belief in goodness, forgiveness, kindness, love, of God as we like to think of him and or her. Now, this is probably just the priestly writer showing how hard the ordination ceremony can be, how necessary in order to obtain the right to be an intermediary between God and the people. After all, the people can't sacrifice directly or speak to God themselves anymore. And even then, if not perfect, you might still find that you transgressed, like Nadab and Abihu, and you die. Now, we, like Aaron and his sons, have sat for a week, waiting. Moses calls on them to make the sin offering, the burnt offering, the people's offering, and Aaron and his sons perform these along with the grain offering and the peace offering. The transference of control over religious observance and ritual is complete. No longer will Moses perform sacrifices. That task belongs from this day forward to the priests. Leviticus 9:23. And Moses and Aaron came to the tent of meeting, and they went out and blessed the people, and the Lord's glory appeared to all the people. Now, we came across the glory before, the palpable evidence of God hanging around the tent of meeting. And fire came out from in front of the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fats on the altar. And all the people saw, and they shouted, and they fell on their faces. How awesome that must have looked to all the people. And friends, with that event, the revelation of God before all the people renders the tabernacle the equivalent of Mount Sinai. And the tabernacle is restricted. Think of the power of that. Fire! I'll take you to burn. Fire! I'll take you to learn. You fought hard, you saved and earned. But all of it's going to burn. The great crazy world of Arthur Brown. Friends, the sacrifice that inaugurates Israel's priesthood is ignited by a miraculous fire that comes from God, not humans. The Sinai Epiphany was also heralded by God's fire. This is the first of several stories in which miracles occur to confirm that Aaron and his descendants are the only true priests. But we are now at Leviticus 10:1, where we begin one of only two stories in this book. And boy, it's a doozy. And Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his fire holder, and they put fire in them and set incense on it, and they brought forward unfitting fire, which he had not commanded them, in front of Yahweh. Now, it's not clear just what Nadab and Abihu's offense is. The text says that they bring fire that is zarah, that God had not commanded them, and many commentators have taken this to mean foreign or alien fire, and therefore they've related Nadab's and Abihu's act to foreign worship, like to another god. The term zarah, however, never has the meaning of foreign in any other occurrence in the Torah's law or narrative. Instead, it denotes a person or thing that's outside a particular group. And so in any context dealing with the priests, it refers to a lay person. Now, the consensus of modern interpreters, with precedence in the classic Midrash, is that the fire is alien because it's been taken from a profane source, such as coals taken from an ordinary oven. Nothing, of course, supports that, but it sounds good. But what a story. In their first act, after ordination into the sacred cabal of the priesthood, Aaron's two eldest sons are incinerated in the exact same fashion as the offering provided minutes earlier. Now, I remember as a kid, fresh off the great science fiction films in the 50s, I would imagine a ray gun of some kind emanating from the altar, disintegrating them. Or Gort, disintegrating the tanks in the Michael Rene film The Day the Earth Stood Still. And friends, I think that is what the priestly writer was hoping to do. This is a book of rules, not stories. This story is only here to emphasize a rule. Holy is sacred territory, but only for the few. Now, I talk a lot about intent and how important a concept it was to the development of early Judaism and prayer. And here is where intent does not matter. See, the law of sacred, of ritual, is presented by the priests as being different. Only a priest, for example, can enter the tent of meeting. If a lay person enters, well, that person must die. and the law does not provide for taking the motives for the trespass into account. Now we see it in the famous case of the ark in 2 Samuel 6, where Uzzah touches the ark to steady it because it is rocking on the backs of oxen. His motive is good, but he dies because, like Nadab and Abihu, he has violated the boundary of the holy. That boundary is another of the separations and divisions that this book emphasizes. Now, this may be the priestly writers obsessing over exactitude of ritual, and if not followed perfectly, dire consequences can be faced. While this goes against the belief in a kind, benevolent, loving God, it is simply the reminder of the province of sacrosanctity. After 7 chapters of laws of sacrifice and 2 chapters describing the ordination rituals, the sudden account of this horrible event in the middle of the ceremonies comes as a shock. It's even more powerful because the exact same words that describe the miraculous consumption of the ordination sacrifice 2 verses earlier now describe this miraculous killing of Nadab and Abihu. Now, some believe that the story should be separate from the story of the consecration, citing it coming at the beginning of a chapter. But it belongs here, friends. Don't forget, chapter divisions came later. And here, connected directly to the consecration, is a more powerful place in showing the special role of the priesthood. The last verses of the story of the consecration pictures the events as happening in the presence of the entire people who are assembled. And Moses explicitly refers to the presence of the people in his first words to Aaron after his son's death. It was seen by everyone. The story of Nadab and Abihu is therefore most probably to be understood as a horror that occurs during the inauguration of the priesthood. And yes, my friends, Moses' attitude towards what just happened is pretty heartless when he tells Aaron and his remaining sons Eleazar and Ithamar that they must not mourn for Nadab and Abihu. Their pain is a reminder that the standard for leaders is tougher than for others, according to the Torah, but not seemingly according to today. But then, leaders do not get away with more because of their positions. Priests, prophets, kings, rabbis, presidents, they suffer harder consequences. And this scene is actually the great foreshadow of Moses and Aaron's fate. For those of us who know what's coming later in the story, this is preparation for the episode of Moses' own sin. When Moses will strike the rock at Meribah, God will impose a frightful consequence for him and for Aaron. And the reason that God will give to Moses and Aaron will be, because you did not trust in me to make me holy before the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses' own words to Aaron here will come back to bite him there. And God speaks now to Aaron for the first time, and he tells him, in Leviticus 10:9, you shall not drink wine and beer, you and your sons with you, when you come to the tent of meeting, so you won't die. It is an eternal law through your generations, and to distinguish between the holy and the secular, and between the impure and the pure. Now again, some commentators jumped on this and suggested that Nadab and Abihu were intoxicated, and that's why they were incinerated. Well, that's simply reaching, looking for justification. It's not the case. I told you this is a book about divisions and separations, a parallel to creation, to distinguish. Leviticus is concerned with orderliness, and this orderliness is reminiscent of the creation account in Genesis. And there are key parallels of wording, especially the term for distinction, which is used throughout this entire book, lahabdil. As God creates by making distinctions expressed in divine speech, so the function of the priesthood is described in Leviticus as to distinguish, lahabdil, between the holy and the secular, between the impure and the pure. Here, law is conceived as a reflection in the human realm of the order that was originally pictured in the cosmic realm. In Genesis 1, the world comes into comprehensible being when God divides the chaotically interfused primal elements, light and darkness, waters above and waters below, the sea and dry land, from each other. Here the Israelites are commanded to emulate God by setting up a framework for daily life in which they are to divide between the unclean and the clean, between what is forbidden and permitted, and they do it by talking about what is to be eaten. And the balance of this parsha is concerned with this, about what is to be eaten and an industry is born. God lists the animals that can be consumed, and we have been debating them ever since. Leviticus 11:2. This is the animal that you shall eat. Now, the laws of permitted and forbidden animals add further restrictions to the sacrificial laws. God requires not only ritual slaughter, priestly performance, and location at the tent of meeting. God delineates to Moses and Aaron which animals may be eaten as well. Now, the reason for these particular inclusions and exclusions have never been worked out persuasively. Explanations based on health and hygiene are difficult to defend, both because the text never states this, and because such explanations cannot be consistently applied to the cases. Claims about the unhealthy habits of pigs apply equally to various fowl that are permitted. Claims that the forbidden animals were objects of worship are simply wrong. Suggestions that the system is ultimately about matters of ethics and not food, that is, that it teaches discipline, self-denial, and so on, are just not supported in the text. So trying to understand the reason for what is in the list can be crazy-making. We simply are not provided enough information, and this goes for anthropological and historical evidence too. I think there are more moral and ethical laws at play here, such as the not boiling a kid in its mother milk, something not even mentioned here, nor is the prohibition against ingesting blood, and these are two of the cornerstone kashrut rules. Now, one thing to consider, my friends, is the closer an animal is to man, the more forbidden. That, and some are simply revolting, and that's why I think they're forbidden. You know, animals can't have soft hands and feet like us. They can't be carnivores. They must be as removed or distinguishable as possible, and so animals must have hooves and chew their cud. Now, this certainly doesn't account for the entire list, but it emphasizes again this concept of distinction, of separation, of orderliness, of pure and impure that this book demands. The world is sacred, and so is everything in it. Express your gratitude, light a candle, make a wish, celebrate your life and the lives of those you love. Share your feelings with them, live free, be free, honor your freedom, be well, be happy, and be blessed. Share and honor the light, and all who live in the light continue to shine. Continue to send everyone you know goodwill and love. Pray for peace and freedom for everyone, and end to terror and hatred. Remember, friends, we are a community. We learn together, we celebrate each other, we love each other. We share this ride together, men and women equally. Let us send out love, not fear. Send out peace, harmony, good healing to all who need it. And please do learn to forgive, learn to love. Open your hearts. Honor those relationships of your life. Tell those that you love them. Take advantage of the time you have, and remember the journey is yours to enjoy. We take the twists and turns and the patterns that weave through the fabric of our lives in our effort to grow, to learn, to be, to love. So please do love. Share the light with all who live in the light and all who need the light. And send healing to Mordechai, to Sherry, to all who need it. Knock down those barriers that hold you back. In the words of Badfinger, knock down the old gray wall. Be a part of it all. Nothing to say, nothing to see, nothing to do. If you would give me all, as I would give it to you, nothing would be. Nothing would be. Nothing would be. No matter where you go, there will always be a place. Can't you see it in my face? Bless you all. Have a fantastic week. A week of love and light and peace and healing. And thanks. And send your goodwill to those who need it. Let me know if you want the booklet to track your 12 days. Keep on dreaming. Keep on being. Keep teaching. Keep sharing. Keep shining. Keep spreading your holiness. And thank you all for joining me. Klatu Barada Nikto. Shabbat Shalom. Take care. Bye.